But I did send a note like that to Renee, but I was late. So,
Yeah, she
Yeah.
came to see me, so, and I also have her, I can text her if we need to as well. So she mentioned something to me.
Yes,
She said, but the two of you had been corresponding.
correct.
Okay,
About several things.
okay, yeah,
That's the only one that affects somebody.
okay.
So so we have a quorum?
Yeah, you do. You've got Pat and Kieran and Lonnie. Doug is here and Cat TV
Okay.
and Tim Nibbled. Okay,
Okay. We will open the meeting of the North Bennington Prudential Committee for April 9th of 2025. And looking for public comments if there are any, but we don't see anybody, do we?
nope.
So Doug, you want to speak to your treasurer's report?
Is Karen gonna take notes?
Sure.
And, oh, yes, we don't have Lori here to take minutes tonight. So I'm going to have to ask Kieran to be our ad hoc secretary.
All right, give me a minute here while I pull up a document then.
Sorry, what?
Just give me a minute while I pull up a document to do it.
Yep, sure.
Just let me know when you're set, Kieran.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so based on the end of March balances, again rounding off, we're right around 580,000 in cash available, unrestricted. So just a quick jump to the AP warrants. You'll see that there's a large amount on there, but the bulk of that was actually from late February and into March. So all that has already cleared. So the only items that have not been paid yet is the final AP on the warrant, which is AP 040925, which is for just over 153. So as far as a cash position, we're okay. We are due in April for state funds to come through. I'm going to be cheerful and say that there's no question that that's going to come through as it's supposed to. So that is due this month. And I will begin the process with M&T to start our tax anticipation note, either hopefully by the end of April, if not the first week in May. That will give us at least a 2-month window to be able to have all the documents ready for July 1st. So I will make sure to get that started in plenty of time. Should go a little quicker this time because we know they're going to require an attorney. So I'll reach out to Renee and have her get the attorney involved right from the get-go. And nothing's going to change from last year. So everything should be all set there.
All right.
Other than that, I don't. Okay, I'll stay on. If anybody has any questions while the meeting's going along, I'm just going to turn my video off.
I want to make a mention that there's an item in the 040425 part of the warrant.
Yep.
For Highland Hall School.
Yep.
We're gonna hold that check until May. It's a
Okay.
mistake. So, how do we, I mean, do we just say that we're not approving that yet?
Or email up.
I think that's what we should do.
So yeah, I think Ray, I think since it's on the warrant, you would need to exclude that
Yes.
from the approval process. So whoever makes the motion would exclude that to be included. I mean, you could even make the statement to be clear that it'll be paid in May as opposed to April.
So.
And that way there,
I'll make a motion to accept the warrant, except for the payment to Highland Hall of $7,705.50, which will be paid in May instead of April.
And this, this warrant also has the payments that were made in March, which I signed for. And so it's just a ratification of those.
but I think, Ray, I think Matt's got a good point though, if you do them separately because of that, as opposed to doing a bulk approval. So if you take the April warrant with Matt's motion, if somebody seconds that, then you could do the ratification of you signing the payrolls and the March warrant.
Okay, so. Yeah, the cover sheet is just April 9th. And this includes all the warrants, the ones I signed for in March, plus this one, but the
Right, but they each
Strikeout.
have their own number.
yes. So. A one. Number. Payroll warrant. The payrolls are separate, aren't they?
Right, so if you wanted to
so-
do a motion for the two payrolls and the March
Right.
as one, since you've already signed those, I think
Okay,
that
so-
makes sense. And then if somebody seconds Matt's, then we're clear on the Highland Hall check.
And Renee is gonna make a notation on the cover sheet of the warrant.
Perfect.
So she's watching right now.
So, the first motion would be to, approve pay 122 and pay 123 and AP for 03/11/25.
Sure.
And that gets us up to April. And then the second motion would be for AP 04/09/25.
Minus the Highland Hall check.
Minus the Highland Hall check, which will be held until May.
Yep. So you have a motion on the table for the second one by Matt, and then you need a motion for your first one and then 2 seconds.
So I need a motion for the pay 122, pay 123, and AP 03/11/25.
So moved.
I'll second both of those, the first and second motions.
Okay, thank you. So we have motions and seconds for both parts of the warrant. And, I'll call the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. There we go. I marked that out on. You can have her mark that. All right, budget status, we skipped. I think consent agenda, we just did. And policies, so we have some policies to warn. One is policy 2600, superintendent of schools evaluation and review. I'll make the motion that we warn it. And get a second.
Yeah, second.
Thank you. All in favor, if there's no discussion, that is. Aye.
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 Okay, is that everybody? Yes. Policy 4100, alcohol and. It's
Paul and drug-free workplace should be the.
It's a
alcohol and
mistype of an
drug-free
ampersand.
workplace.
Yeah, it's alcohol and drug-free workplace.
Right. That's an and, I
Mhm.
guess. Okay, so that's also a warning. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of warning policy 4100 alcohol and drug-free workplace?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, policy 5175 possession, sale, distribution and use of illegal substances. This is also for warning. I'll make
Yes.
the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Lonnie.
You're welcome.
All in favor of warning policy 5175 possession, sale, distribution and use of illegal substances? Say aye or raise your hand. That's all of us. Okay, thank you. And unbelievably, we're already to chairs. And is Tim here?
Yes.
Okay. So I figured that Tim could talk a little bit about the education, finance and governance reform legislative proposals for our edification and for anybody who might be listening to us as well. And let's invite Tim to speak to it. And then we could have a discussion on whatever questions people have, members of the board have.
Good evening, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
This is, the legislation has been busy.
Could you get a little closer to your mic or speak up? a little?
The legislation has been
Yeah,
busy.
there we go. Thank you.
The proposals right now are, have been sort of whittled down to one. At the beginning of the term, we were looking at sort of three: the governor's proposal, the House proposal, and then there was one sort of in the mix in the Senate. And sort of right now, it's the only one that seems to be gaining traction is the House bill, which is H454. And H454 it looks like it's attempting to do a number of the things that the governor's proposal wanted to do, but it sort of rolls out a slower timeline. So the governor's proposal wanted sort of much of this to be done within sort of a 2-year timeline. The House proposal is looking more at a 4 to 5 year timeline for a lot of this. The biggest piece in the start would be the change of sort of governance and things like that, and new maps would be proposed by December of next year. And they had a committee would be tasked with putting together 3 maps that the legislation would look at. So that's one piece. The other piece is Ways and Means has been looking at the foundation formula that the governor proposed. And the foundation formula that they are looking at modifies some of the numbers that the governor was using to sort of really key in on that. And the math behind their proposal is a little different than the governor's, so the numbers are a little different. Their proposal is actually significantly higher than the governor's proposal, so I'm not sure how that will be received from the governor's office. It looks like it's going to be voted on tomorrow or the next day, and it probably will pass out of the House, and then it'll be looked at in the Senate. And the Senate will be then in negotiations to sort of figure out some of the things that they feel like they need to change to make it work for them. And then later in the session, they will bring it to a vote. Right now, the limits on the schools are pretty significant. Some schools in our area would potentially make it through the gauntlet. Some schools might not. The caveats right now, as the House has proposed, would be that schools would have to have over 50% or 51% of their students publicly funded to still receive public funds. They don't get into any sort of details around historic districts and stuff like that. So the mapping piece that's going to come out later on would be significant as to how that plays out. The funding formula, the numbers would, as they stand right now in the House proposal, could potentially work. Some of the things that are concerning long-term, and it'll be in the details there, is how special education funding will work. I think that it could work well for middle schools and high schools, but for elementary schools, it's a little more challenging because the kids come in and we don't necessarily know if they have needs for a year or two, but we may need to be servicing those needs, but may not be able to get any of those costs reimbursed through this kind of a process. So there's a lot of things that'll be in question as this model moves forward, and whether it'll make it through the Senate with any modifications or not, or if it'll make it through the governor's veto power. But I do think it's going to pass out of the House favorably tomorrow or the next day. I have assurances from folks in the Senate that they are going to try to modify things to make it favorable for as many independent schools as it can, but there's no guarantee that that will work. That's sort of the quick down and dirty of it. Are there any questions that I can answer? I'm happy to go into more depth on certain areas if folks have questions.
So they legitimately are allowing some independent schools to go through in their proposal.
As the proposal is written presently.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's a lot of room over the next couple of years to fine tune exactly what the map is going to look like and exactly what the criteria for independent schools is going to look
Right.
like.
And
Tim, can you just explain for me or clarify a little bit more on the bit that you were saying about schools maintaining funding as long as their population had 51% of publicly funded students? Like how
Let's say in that model, Highland Hall, which I think only has 5 or 6 or 7 publicly funded kids, would no longer be eligible for public funding. Southshire, I don't know exactly what their breakdown is.
I think they probably meet the 51%. But I'm
So
not
if
sure.
they meet the 51%, then they would be eligible. The village school, we're at like 90%. So we clearly meet that criteria. Schools in other parts of the state have a different kind of mix. And so some of those schools may not meet that criteria, but others will. So schools like Burton and the other historic town academies would clearly meet that criteria. Long Trail would clearly meet that criteria, but I would guess there's going to be a number of them that don't. Does that answer your question, Lonnie?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you.
So Tim, this is Doug. So do you think that 51% for publicly funded students is kind of the bargaining chip that was used on both sides to say, some of these independent schools truly make sense and are of a need? And do you think that's why they're putting that number in there? So maybe that number will kind of carry through and keep going.
I think what they're doing there is yes, I think they're trying to say, are these schools really fundamentally core to serving the public? So if they're serving more than 50% of their kids are public kids, then they probably are central to serving the public. So maybe that was their lens. I don't know exactly, but that's my hypothesis as well.
Thank you.
Okay. On the governance side, what are they? I'm not clear what they're doing.
So presently, the proposal says that the Committee on the Future of Public Education, which has about, I think, 20 members or so, would create a subcommittee that would be tasked with creating at least 3 maps for the legislation to look at in the next session. And then they would decide on which of those maps move forward. But it would be some sort of restructuring. There's no commitment as to how many districts or things like that. In some of the discussions that I've heard, they were looking at districts of the size of 4,000 or something like that. But what it'll end up being in the end, I don't know. And whether there will be supervisory unions in the mix or just districts, that I don't know either. That's
Districts
unclear.
or-
It's
yeah.
unclear in the writing of the bill.
Or SD's supervisory districts.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the thing that I think one of the aspects of that that's stacked against independent schools is the vast majority of the folks on the committee for the future, or the commission for the future, it's the committee, sorry, the committee for the future of public education, is in opposition to independent schools. So I think, maybe there's two folks on that committee that are favorable to independent schools of the 20.
Olive
So it
Rolls
also
would be
will
one of
depend
them.
on what that subcommittee looks like. I think the Senate is going to try to rewrite that piece potentially, so that there is a more equitable sharing of folks on that committee, and maybe it'll be legislators versus versus former superintendents and things like that.
Right. So, so you don't actually know what the mix of any particular organizational structure is going to be.
It doesn't have
whether
the
it's
it doesn't have the details
SU
in there. No.
or a,
And
the
if
governor's.
it does, I'm not aware of that. I
Yeah,
think
right.
it's just that they've tasked them to create new maps.
Right. Well, to me, this is, all in the House, at least, it's always been about reducing, local control.
Oh, I'm sorry. One other piece I neglected, and the reason I wasn't thinking of it is it doesn't pertain to our school directly, but there's also pieces around class size.
Yep.
So there would be very defined minimum class sizes unless you meet
Right.
certain criteria.
15 for
You know,
through fourth grade, and then
Yeah.
22, I think.
Yep.
for-
So that may be something that would be a hindrance to schools like Southshire or Highland Hall, because they also, I think, don't allow multi-age groups to be more than spanning 2 years.
Right.
So
From
that-
the information coming out from Southshire, from my experience with them is a desire for a different bill than HR 54.
yeah, I don't
think because it would eliminate.
Yeah, so that's going to be a
Highland Hall,
discussion
Southside.
in the Senate. I think it is going to pass out of the House tomorrow or the next day. We've been working diligently. I've actually talked on the phone with all of our local legislators, and some will be voting favorably for it, and some will be voting no on it.
Just
Right,
another quick
yes.
clarification, because I know that VSBA sent out information about promoting a yes vote on HR 54 as alternative to the governor's kind of like more sped up 5-district plan.
Yep.
Is a no vote on HR 54 opening up towards a different bill being proposed, or is that kind of like stepping backwards into, not that it's going to affect the vote tomorrow, but
Yep.
just for my own clarity?
So H454 is the only one that's out there now. The governor has sort of put his aside for now, but it may resurface if this one doesn't pass. Or the Senate proposal may resurface if this one doesn't pass. Because I think there is certainly energy to have something move forward. I think what some of the different organizations and different special interests have this one in favor is that it's slower to roll out change versus the governor's proposal was going to be really abrupt change and really shake things up. So I think some of these different groups across the state are hoping this bill with a slower rollout will give everybody more time to adjust.
Well, it's not gonna give us more time to adjust.
Hey Tim, I know we talked about Seth's bill that he proposed. Is the House bill is H 454 follow closely towards that, or is it kind of a combination of that Seth's bill plus maybe a couple of others?
No, Seth's bill with his map has been was I think pretty resoundingly said that that was not going to be able to move forward in the House at all. So it's been tabled for now, but it may resurface in the mapping next year if this bill moves forward. It may end up being one of the three maps. Who knows? There's going to be a lot of work that happens between the end of this session and December if this bill goes forward. And in that bill, in Seth's proposal, it was never quite a bill proposal. It was just a
Right.
proposal that did have a way forward with for the vast majority of independent schools across the state.
So, should members of this board contact legislators in the House from our area?
I think it certainly wouldn't hurt. I think it sounded like many of them are pretty well set in their positions, but I think it certainly wouldn't hurt. But I'm always fearful that if a bill doesn't pass, what's the one what's the next one down the line, and is that going to be better or potentially worse?
Worse.
So I
Right.
I I don't know. It's the devil that you know or the devil that you don't, I guess. In this case, at least some of the pieces are out for us to look at.
Mhm.
And it's also a slow rollout. So it's going to be a lot of discussions, a lot of stuff happening in between now and then that may change it. It may be rewritten in its entirety over the next 4 years or 5 years as it's being implemented. So that's something there to consider as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, how much is likely to change in the governance side of this? Because
I
that's
think
really unspecified here.
I think there will be drastic change in the governance.
Yeah.
I think there will be anybody taking a bird's eye view of the way the state is divided up and looking at the economics of it. If you want to reduce costs and things like that, one of the pieces is some sort of consolidation and what that may look like. The hope there is that doing it slowly will be more thoughtful and do it in hopefully a way that makes things better versus just an abrupt change to something that they don't know what the ultimate outcome will be and haven't talked to everybody on the ground. But I do think you're not going to be looking at 119 districts and 52 supervisory unions. You're going to be looking at something in the range of 10 to 20 or less.
So, pretty much they're going to end up hurting a lot of small schools in rural towns. Would you say?
I think there's going to be some special stipulations around some of those that are
Mhm.
truly rural, and especially at the elementary
That are
level.
necessarily
Yep.
of necessity, they're rural.
Yeah.
They're
So
small.
I think they are. I mean, that's one of the pieces around doing this more slowly is to try and really look at some of those individual schools and what population they're serving and why they're serving them and how they're serving them and how far they are away versus just
Yeah.
wholesale change quickly for just the sake of change.
I didn't notice much in there. Of course, I was looking at the JFO analysis, so that's not the bill. But do you know how much emphasis there is on improving educational quality? Or is there any? That's all left to
That I
further
couldn't
work.
even speak to that, Ray. I wish the things that I've been drawn to have been sort of some of the numbers and things like
Yeah.
that. I've not even looked at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think it always is important for the village school and Southshire and other schools like us that are doing good work to make sure the folks in the legislation know that we are, and that part of the governor's proposal was that he wanted and Secretary Saunders wanted schools that are doing the good work to continue. That was one of the things that they wanted education quality to be maintained or increased across the state versus doing something that may negatively impact educational outcomes or educational opportunities for kids.
Yeah. Which seems to me that they're likely to impact the children who are from smaller rural areas who end up on buses for lengthy periods of time.
Yeah, so I'm hopeful. I don't know. I like to try and be an optimist in all these things. I hope people have good intentions, and hopefully they will, be thoughtful in that and think about what is going to be what's in service of the child and the family versus what's in service of the bottom line. I hope the bottom line does not outweigh the service to kids and families and just providing them the best educational opportunities we can.
I really don't know what else to say at the moment. I find it pretty disagreeable, but I don't know that they're actually attacking the root of the problem. So I don't know. They think they are, but they didn't really. They thought they were doing that in Act 46, and it's not obvious that that was successful, and certainly not in every case. But,
There's only one root to the problem, and it's healthcare.
yeah. That's the biggest cost driver, the single biggest cost driver. And if you caught the Michaela LaFrac interviewing the chair of the Accountable Care Board, it's a disaster. There's it's just going up. It's going to keep going up. And that means, double-digit increases as far as the eye can see. So I'm not sure that anything they're going to do is going to stop that. It's just going to keep driving it, right? Unless we have a revolution in healthcare, the way we pay for it. And there doesn't seem to be any appetite for that anywhere.
What's the current sense of impact on federal funding to the SU? Maybe Laura can speak to that. I don't know.
Yeah, there was.
Matt, you talking about the grants?
Just
Yeah.
whatever they're deciding they're not going to pay anymore.
So right now, the state is guiding us to continue to plan for our federal funding for FY 26 as we normally would, and so we are. And so Renee Gordon and I are currently, meeting with our public schools and the independent and public schools in our attendance zone this week. And we're planning like we normally do for probably more level funding, so what we can't say, so all of our federal grants right now, we expect to have they're pushing out the release date until later this spring. Grants are due by July 1. So we're doing all of the planning work that we normally do because that's what we've been advised to do and to plan for. So we're not planning for any more money. We're planning for level funding. Yes.
There was a report from some AOE officials that went down and met with the Department of Education, like including the head of the department.
Yes.
And it seemed like it was going to be fairly level
Yes.
funded.
Yep.
They weren't going to be slashing and burning there.
Right. So that's right now, that's, what we're planning for. And the conversations we're having again with the public schools and then the private and independent schools in our attendance. So yes.
Okay. All right. So in our case, that would be special ed students at the village school mostly.
No, so we have title, today.
Entitled.
Yeah, so I met with many of the schools that you talked about in this meeting today, and we talk about title funding, and it's based on the amount of schools again in our attendance zone that want to collaborate, and that falls under the three titles: Title I, Title II, and Title IV for our district, and then also IDAB, which is our special education funding. So both. Okay, so there's 3 titles and then IDEAB. And we had conversations with most of the schools yesterday and today.
So Tim, what do you get do you get money from Title I and the other titles that Laura just mentioned?
Yes, we are eligible for funding through those mechanisms for things like professional development, for some additional special education services, things like that, and we have been utilizing those funds.
Yeah, but I knew special education. I didn't know they were titles.
Yeah.
All right, so is there anything else to talk about right now?
I thought it was interesting to see the rollout of the DEI catastrophe that the secretary orchestrated.
I don't think she, I think she's very much a puppet.
Yeah.
But at least, there was a large group of activists from different areas saying, Vermont schools are not going to put up with this and push back. And I think there's still a lot of energy, at least from my arenas, on pushing back on that. So that's a little hopeful thing to throw into the meeting.
Well, everything she wrote in the initial letter has been retracted, so it's now an AOE statement that we follow Title VI. And we always have, and we're not changing.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
So I think that's at least an acceptable stance at the moment and pretty well tracks with our neighbors.
Well, it's one
Neighboring
voice,
states.
correct. So Vermont's going to respond
One
with
voice, right.
one voice
No,
that
that's it.
represents all of us,
Yeah.
correct?
Which I think is great because it insulates individual districts.
Correct. Mhm.
from attack. Even to attack the whole state.
That's right.
As was pointed out, there's no mention of those forbidden words in the title.
That's correct. Yeah.
So it's interesting. We now have to censor ourselves,
Mhm.
but we don't have to change what we're doing.
Supporting all kids.
So I appreciate, Lonnie, your response to that, and I'm glad you brought it up. I was looking into it, but I'm glad you pushed on that a little bit. So I was reading stuff and I found stuff to, kept looking for what was going to happen. And finally, it showed up on the front page of the SU's
There it was.
website.
Yeah, it's a button right on the front of our website.
Okay. I don't have anything else to say. Any other comments? Okay. So shall we adjourn this meeting?
I'll make said motion.
All right. I'll accept that motion. I'll second it at least. How about that? All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
All your legislators.